I've got Dan Belmont of Good Wine, Good People, the proprietor and the home of the New York Bottle Shop. And so thank you so much for joining me.
Hey, thanks for having me. Yeah.
We've chatted before for things like Three Wine Men, and you know, Dan really is you know, the ambassador, if you like, for New York State wines in this country.
The ambassador that nobody asked for.
Exactly, quite exactly. But we wouldn't get rid of you now. This is perfect. And so thanks for getting in and coming to see me, because New York State wines, you know, I've worked with English wine for a hugely long time and grew up here and you know, it's such a nascent early stage kind of region. And when I first met you, the similarities there just struck me. You know, New York State wines are such sort of fresh, new things that have arrived here. And so I think I'd love to set out, you know, all about the region together and talk a little bit about it and, you know, probably taste something.
Sure.
But before we do any of that, Dan, tell us about you. So where did it all start?
Oh goodness, I am Long Island born and raised. So I'm a native New Yorker, and I lived there the majority of my life, with the exception of uni. And I did 10 years in New York City before moving here to London with my wife about 6 years ago.
And always hospitality.
Always hospitality, yeah. I mean, I have a theater degree from university, but that's only going to get me so far, right?
Come on, this is good.
And so, like many struggling actors, I ended up with Be Our Guest Hospitality, big corporate restaurant group run by Stephen Hansen in New York. I was a maitre d', 3-piece suits, you know, the whole thing, big steakhouse. And so that's where I was introduced to wine, and the wine team there introduced me to the Finger Lakes. And really, I spent a weekend up there with my now wife, and I've never looked back. It was just the first place where it all kind of came together for me. You know, you can see the lake, you can taste the wine, you see the vineyards. It just has a holistic moment for me personally in my wine journey that connected all the dots for me.
And like, you know, like London's relationship with English wine, you know, it's been grown all around, and you can drive out of central London and get there. Really, I suppose Finger Lakes is a similar vibe with New York.
Sure.
You know, how long does it take to get up there?
Well, and your major regions, you have Long Island out to the east.
Yes.
That's still about a 2-hour drive. You've got the Hudson Valley, probably about a 2-hour drive north. And then if you go northwest, about 4.5 hours from New York City, you'll end up in the Finger Lakes.
That's not too bad. That's all right. We can do that.
Yeah, it's a drive that I've come to know and love.
100%.
Yeah.
Let's taste some wine.
Let's do it.
Chuck it in the glass.
Sounds
And
good.
let's go for it. And so with that, working in hospitality in New York, you discover the Finger Lakes. It becomes this, I suppose, kind of heart and soul moment. You know, it's this discovery of brilliant people. What do you find? There's a great food scene, as I understand it.
Yeah, listen, I love an underdog, right? And 10 years ago, you know, selling wine from the Finger Lakes in New York City is equally as challenging as selling it in London now.
That's
right?
very, yes, fine.
And then you have Riesling, which is a largely, as you know, a maligned grape sometimes,
100%.
right? And so I found, you know, a banner to wave, you know, with the Finger Lakes and specifically their Rieslings. And so starting to show those wines in New York City. And, you know, we're 12 years in, I guess, with my love affair with this region. And I got married up there. It's a very special place for me. And I'm thrilled to have the largest selection of New York State wine in the UK with the New York Bottle Shop.
So that's where to go and find this stuff. So you know, it's increasingly being represented across the trade, you know, and I suppose you do this brilliant job of being an ambassador for it and driving awareness of it. And actually in the time I've sort of known you, which is a really short period of time, there have been pretty major steps in you know, broadening the horizons for New York wine here. Tell me about the region itself. So today we're going to talk, you know, less sort of New York State, you know, we're talking Finger Lakes, which are these beautiful, very, very deep, very long lakes, kind of just south of Lake Ontario. But we're talking kind of Canadian border at this point.
Yeah, when we talk about the lake effect of the Finger Lakes, we are talking just as much about the Great Lakes to the north as we are the Finger Lakes themselves. You know, bodies of water, as we know, major wine growing regions, most of them have them, and they work incredibly well for temperature moderating. And so what you have is this kind of 1 to 3 kilometer band around the major Finger Lakes where the temperatures aren't as cold in the winter, aren't as hot in the summer, and it's this really nice belt for wine growing, and has been for a really long time.
And you say that, but only just. This is really cool climate. You know, this is cutting edge, pretty cool climate viticulture. You know,
listen, if you could make it there, you could make it anywhere.
100%. And so the other kind of claim to fame, I suppose, that I'm aware of with the Finger Lakes is Dr. Constantin Frank. And like 1957 was the first person to plant vinifera varieties, and so this, in terms of American wine history and heritage.
Yeah, it's funny. We are, I say we, but the Finger Lakes is a young region, but with over 200 years of history. Yeah, and so, that's something we have to balance out as we tell this story. If it wasn't for the native grape varieties and the hybrid grape varieties that came before vinifera, we wouldn't be where we are today.
100%.
And so they are important for the kind of whole story. But yeah, folks like Dr. Konstantin Frank emigrated from the Ukraine in the 1950s and started working with the Cornell University experiment station up there. And he's like, if I can grow Riesling in the Ukraine, I could do it here.
It's going to work.
Right? And so folks like him, we call them the vinifera pioneers. And Hermann J. Wiemer followed not long after, working together with Konstantin Frank before starting the eponymous wine.
And so that's
winery.
in the sort of 60s moving into the 70s sort of thing.
Yep.
And so vinifera is beginning to take hold. Other wine regions around the States is kicking off.
Figuring it out.
Exactly.
Figuring it out. Long Island planted their first vineyard in 1976 as the first vinifera vineyard, and it's almost exclusively vinifera on Long Island. So
and when
somebody had to come first.
When that happens, Riesling was obviously focused on, pretty early doors in terms of vinifera then, but it's not just Riesling.
No.
We're going to taste two today. I'm going to talk about them. In fact, I'm going to pull the second.
Oh, please.
But what are the varieties again?
So Wiemer started out with experimenting with Riesling, with Chardonnay, and with Gewürztraminer, and he went 3 for 3, which was pretty cool. And so those are 3 flagship white grape varieties of the region, but there's a lot more. Gruner Veltliner also shows incredibly well, Austrian varieties. Cabernet Franc on the red side is definitely taking top marks, which is great. The state itself, just broad facts, we're talking over 60 different vinifera grape varieties, all produced in a premium style. And there's very few places that can claim that kind of diversity.
So there's a broad mix of key cool climate European varietals. And that probably follows the heritage of a lot of the producers. So, Hermann J. Wiemer is the first wine that we're going to look at and talk about. It sounds pretty Germanic, and we've already mentioned about, Konstantin Frank coming out from the Ukraine. There's a lot of European, immigration that brought, I suppose, the culture and the history and the heritage along with them. And so that's had a huge impact on the region.
The region has its challenges in terms of viticulture and winemaking. However, it also has all of the hallmarks of a really top quality classic wine growing region, and so it's been attracting talent for the last half century, really, starting with guys like Frank and Wiemer, but even in the last 10 years we've seen investment from Paul Hobbs, international impresario,
man of wine.
and German families, French families that travel the world and make wine everywhere, but they're choosing to plant their roots, pun intended, in the Finger Lakes.
And the wines are very European styled. These are both really classic wines. So we've got 2 here. Let's talk about them a little bit. You've got Hermann J. Wiemer, which is this, both Riesling, of course, and so this is 2017. Dry, biodynamic.
Biodynamic.
So these guys are going to be what?
Yeah.
First biodynamic producers.
So current owners of Hermann J. Wiemer, Fred and Oscar, took over. Fred was Hermann's longtime assistant winemaker. Oscar is his college mate, and they came in, took over in 2007, and within 5 years they issued all herbicides and pesticides, and that's across all of their vineyards, right? And then in 2014 they said, let's push it even further. Let's look at our home vineyard, our HJW site, and they currently are operating 33 acres with biodynamic principles, and should have their Demeter certification in the spring, which would be the first Demeter certification for New York State.
And so carrying on around Lake Seneca, that central kind of large lake, you then come onto the other side of it, the east, and you've got these guys. So tell me a little bit about wine number 2.
Sure. So Hermann Wiemer with their vineyards on the west side of Seneca, and then you have Red Newt with several plots across the east side of Seneca and elsewhere too on other lakes. And so Red Newt, these are locals. This is Dave and Deborah Whitting. Started the winery in 1998. Dave had been winemaker for I think 4 or 5 other producers prior to starting his own label.
So local couple. So. So I suppose we've got the very much the European side of things, Bernkastel in the Mosel, immigrating over, and then you've got the locals,
the hometown,
doing it as well, and stylistically they're both very classic. So they've got really clean, lean, ultra fresh profiles, and they are Riesling through and through.
Should we try one?
Right? Please jump in. I'm sipping away as we go. So good. And both ultra dry. I know both producers make sweeter styles as well, but we've got here the dries. And what I'm saying here is, I think stylistically, Finger Lakes, what I love about it is it does have this classicism to it, but there's a brightness of fruit, this delicious, opulent kind of huge thing.
We are not ignoring the American palate.
No.
Which likes fruit, you know?
But there's a natural terroir to that as well, I think, and it's great. Dan, I wish we had another double all of this, mate. It's brilliant, and it's just the start, but thank you so much for
It's
chatting
my
to me
pleasure.
about Finger Lakes.